In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, January 5th. Arrivals from China are now required to take a COVID-19 test prior to departure for South Korea, and the mandate will be extended to those from Hong Kong and Macau this weekend. And the US Federal Reserve reaffirms its priority on curbing inflation, regardless of rampant concerns over a recession this year, claiming that price stability is essential. Over in the Vatican City, Pope Benedict XVI is poised to have his funeral on Thursday morning, having passed away on December 31st at the age of 95. Starting on this Thursday, as announced earlier, arrivals from China are required to hand in a negative COVID-19 test result upon landing. Also, come Saturday, the mandate will be expanded to include those from Hong Kong and Macau. Our Ising-jae reports.
Starting Thursday, all travelers arriving from China will be required to submit a negative test result before entering South Korea. This means Koreans and foreigners boarding flights from China must undergo a PCR test within 48 hours or a rapid antigen test by a medical expert within 24 hours of boarding. However, travelers attending a funeral, on trips for diplomatic purposes, infants and toddlers under the age of 6, and those who have been infected and treated for COVID-19 within 40 days are exempt from the measure. The latest move comes as South Korea is seeing a soaring number of travelers from China testing positive for COVID-19. For instance, figures as of midnight Wednesday show that 131 out of 172 travelers tested positive, meaning a 76% positivity rate. Meanwhile, police said Wednesday that a 41-year-old Chinese national had escaped a government-designated quarantine facility for foreigners after testing positive for COVID-19 upon entering South Korea. The whereabouts of the man is still unknown. The KDCA said the man has been placed in the wanted list for the violation of the Infectious Disease Control and Prevention Act, where under the law, he could face imprisonment of at least 1 year or a fine of over $7,800 as well as deportation. In the meantime, the World Health Organization said Wednesday that China's COVID-19 data is not giving an accurate picture of the situation there and underrepresents the number of hospitalization and deaths from the disease. The remarks come as the WHO prepares to meet with Chinese scientists again on Thursday as part of a wider briefing among member states on the global COVID-19 situation. Earlier, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus reiterated that the agency is concerned about the surge in COVID-19 infections in China and urged Beijing to deliver rapid and regular data on hospitalization and deaths there. Ising-jae, Arirang News.
Right, and according to News Just In, the Chinese man who fled from the quarantine center after testing positive for COVID-19 has been apprehended by authorities here in capital Seoul to face possible charges, of course. Now, meanwhile, also on pandemic-related news, the global health body is urging for caution amid the growing presence of a new COVID strain. Our Yoon Jin has more.
At the beginning of December, only 4% of COVID-19 cases in the United States were from the latest subvariant, XBB.1.5. But in under a month, this strain has overtaken other versions of Omicron, accounting for more than 40% of COVID cases in the U.S., making it the latest dominant strain. On Wednesday, scientists from the World Health Organization confirmed that the XBB.1.5 subvariant has a growth advantage, but said it hasn't yet shown any indication of being more serious or harmful than previous Omicron variants.
But what we can say is that it does have a growth advantage above all of the other subvariants so far. We don't have any data on severity yet or on the clinical picture, but we also do not have an indication that severity has changed with XBB.1.5.
Scientists say that XBB.1.5, like its other XBB relatives, is shown to be the most immune evasive yet. Experts say that what gives it such a growth advantage is that the latest subvariant has a mutation that makes it bind more tightly to cells. Needing more data quickly to get ahead of this fast-changing virus, the WHO Director General called for more effort from China.
We continue to ask China for more rapid, regular, reliable data on hospitalizations and deaths, as well as more comprehensive real-time viral sequencing.
Countries around the world have been imposing measures on travelers from China. The 27 member states of the European Union have agreed to strongly encourage a requirement that would obligate all travelers coming from China, regardless of nationality, to show a negative COVID-19 test, and also that passengers on flights to and from China wear medical masks or respirators, in addition to other hygiene measures. These recommendations will enter into force as of Monday, January 9th. Here in South Korea, the first case of the XBB.1.5 subvariant was detected on December 8th, and to date, 13 cases have been reported nationwide, of which 7 were imported. Yoon, Arirang News.
In other news, the Yoon administration may suspend the September 19th military accord signed between the Moon administration and North Korea should Pyongyang breach the border again. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is warning North Korea that its behavior is putting the 2018 inter-Korean military agreement at risk.
President Yoon was briefed on Wednesday by the National Security Office, the Defense Ministry, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Defense Development Agency on our drone defense strategy. He ordered officials to review suspending the September 19th inter-Korean military agreement if North Korea carries out provocations involving incursion into our territory.
The 2018 inter-Korean military agreement refers to an agreement signed by former President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un back in 2018, which prohibits the two Koreas from flying around and carrying out on-land military exercises, including artillery firing around the military demarcation line, while also putting buffer zones along their sea borders, in order to prevent direct confrontations. However, North Korea has violated the terms of the agreement several times, most recently flying drones into the South Korean territory as far as into the northern side of the capital. That said, on top of his statement, President Yoon also issued 4 directives to the defense minister. 1. To create a drone unit that can both carry out reconnaissance as well as combat. 2. To mass-produce small drones that are hard to detect within this year. 3. To develop stealth drones. And lastly, to quickly come up with an anti-drone system. An official at the Defense Ministry expressed confidence that all the orders do seem possible to carry out. This includes creating a new multi-purpose drone unit. The official said that while creating a new unit requires the ministry to review a number of items, including the new unit's scope of operation, chain of command, as well as resources, the process will be expedited as much as possible. However, there was no specific timeline given. As for developing a stealth drone within this year, according to the official, the Defense Development Agency has already been doing research into stealth drones, and by pushing things faster, such drone will be developed by the end of the year. South Korea has already had a drone unit since 2018, but the unit had much smaller scope of operation with not much on-field exercise and experience, according to the official. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The United Nations, meanwhile, has urged North Korea to return to talks over its nuclear ambitions and to avoid actions that could counter diplomatic efforts. In a briefing on Tuesday, Deputy Spokesperson for the Secretary-General Farhan Haq said the UN continues to hope that nuclear tensions on the Korean peninsula can be resolved peacefully via dialogue with North Korea. When asked if the UN has been in contact with Pyongyang, he claimed there were not any recent high-level interactions to share, but added the UN has been in touch with all parties on the peninsula during concerning events such as missile tests. Also, on the international front, U.S. President Joe Biden will hold talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at the White House next Friday. Their agenda will cover, among other matters, ways to bolster military cooperation among South Korea, the U.S. and Japan. Separately, National Security Spokesperson John Kirby on Wednesday hinted at more military exercises in the region amid North Korea's brinkmanship and belligerence. Kirby added the U.S.-Japan military cooperation is already quite extraordinary and that the Biden administration will continue to promote trilateral cooperation with South Korea as well. Grim prospects of a recession on the horizon are doing little to weaken the U.S. Federal Reserve's intentions to secure price stability via tough monetary policies. Arirang explains.
The U.S. Federal Reserve wants substantially more evidence of easing inflation. According to the minutes from their most recent meeting on Wednesday local time, the Fed backed fresh rate hikes this year. It said that a restrictive policy stance would need to be maintained until incoming data provided confidence that inflation was on a sustained downward path to 2%, the central bank's inflation target. This, the Fed says, is likely to take some time. The minutes also reveal that a slower pace of rate rises is not an indication of any weakening of the committee's resolve to achieve its price stability goal. Officials also warned that anything other than a necessary relaxing of financial measures would make it more difficult for the committee to restore price stability. Policymakers' interest rate projections published after the meeting showed that most officials now see the interest rate peaking between 5% and 5.25% in 2023. This means at least 0.75 percentage points worth of rate rises to come. It also showed that rate cuts are not expected until 2024. One expert says that with rates so high now, the Fed is growing more cautious going forward.
The Fed, what they're trying to do right now is, balance risks of making sure that inflation gets down much closer to 2% and stays near 2%, while also trying not to over-tighten. And so by slowing down after executing this rapid tightening over 2022, they're going to be able to thread the needle more easily and take in the data as they make these decisions.
Meanwhile, after the Fed's policy meeting, U.S. stocks rose after back-and-forth trading. The S&P 500 gained 0.8% in a volatile session, while the Dow Jones added 0.4%. The technology-heavy Nasdaq Composite advanced 0.7%. Oil prices fell by more than $4 per barrel, posting the steepest percentage loss in the first 2 trading days of any year for over 3 decades. Lee-Hyun, Arirang News.
And staying in the U.S., the House of Representatives has yet to elect its speaker. Now, this comes as Republican leader Kevin McCarthy on Wednesday again failed to secure support from factions inside his own party, losing in 6 ballots since the new Congress convened the day before. A motion to adjourn proceedings until noon on Thursday passed with the deadlock firmly in place. According to local media, negotiations are underway among Republicans to bridge the internal fracture. Now, House speakership traditionally goes to the leader of the majority party, which in this session is the GOP. Back on the local front, smart farming and marine tourism are among the policy goals for this year for related ministries as they seek new growth engines. Our Shin Se-byuk has more on these ambitions.
South Korea is going to ramp up its efforts to boost productivity in the agricultural and marine industries in parallel with the era of digitalization. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries presented their policy plans for the upcoming year to President Yoon. At the briefing, President Yoon stressed the importance of improving the productivity and efficiency of each industry, saying the 2 ministries are dealing with the important matters related to food.
지금은 이제 4차 산업혁명의 시대입니다. 그리고 디지털화가 점점 고도화되는 그런 상황입니다. 그래서 이런 산업자원부라든지 이런 중기벤처부뿐만이 아니라 농수산 또 해양 이런 것을 담당하는 부처에서도 담당하고 있는 산업이 더욱 디지털화되고 더욱 첨단화되고 또 더욱 그 혁신을 이뤄내서 생산성을 높이는 것이 매우 중요합니다.
To start with, the government has set the goal of achieving $10 billion in agricultural exports this year. To achieve that, and for the future of the South Korea's agriculture industry, it will promote smart farming as a future growth engine. Under the plan, the ministry will also work to turn 30% of all greenhouses and barns into the so-called smart facilities by 2027. Also, to nurture young farmers, it will build 3 new smart farms tailored to each region and 2 young farmer startups hubs equipped with smart farms and residences. The Oceans Ministry, meanwhile, unveiled its ambitious plan to create a marine leisure tourism belt in the country's southern coastal area. Under the plan, Busan and the provinces of Gyeongsang-namdo and Jeollanam-do will become major tourist destinations in Northeast Asia. Also, the ministry plans to build 5 of what it calls Korean Cancuns, a reference to the popular resort city in Mexico. Another plan rolled out is to build smart megaports in Busan and Jinhae. In Busan in particular, it plans to establish a smart logistics center. Detailed plans for a new port in Jinhae are due in June this year. 신세벽, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Koreans have the second most powerful passport in the world. In Arton Capital's latest publication of its passport index, South Korea ranked second, tied with 10 other countries, including France and Spain. Now, this means people with Korean passports can travel to 174 destinations visa-free. The UAE topped the list as its citizens can travel visa-free to 181 countries. The US ranked third with 173 countries and neighboring Japan fourth with 172. Down the list, North Korea's passport stood in 90th place with 51 countries accepting it for travel without prior documents. From campus to community. Now, this is what some students in Korea are doing with the learning they're acquiring at universities. They're putting it into practice at rural places. Our Chung Won-ju shows us how.
The usually quiet countryside village during the farming off-season is buzzing with life. At the village entrance, nursing students give the elderly a health checkup.
Since the elderly here do not have a hospital nearby, we are visiting them to do volunteer work, measure blood pressure, check for diabetes, and educate them on health.
Students also give the elderly a makeover. After that, students from the Department of Photography, Image and Drone take portrait photographs for them. Students also replace old lights and houses with LEDs to save power and make homemade jjajangmyeon to eat with all 120 villagers.
It would be so nice if the students could visit at least once a year to share their talents and do various volunteer work for the elderly.
About 60 volunteers, including students and professors from Gwangju University, have taken part in volunteer activities. Students are also satisfied because they can put into practice what they've learned in class.
When students go to rural areas to volunteer, they're encouraged to do activities for the elderly that practice the spirit of sharing, in place of agricultural volunteer work that's difficult to do right now anyways.
The Jeollanam-do Province Regional Headquarters of the National Agricultural Cooperative Federation has collaborated with local universities to expand rural volunteering.
Universities and Nongyap have done separate volunteer work until now, but in the future we hope to work together so that more elderly people in rural areas can benefit from it.
The university students' talent donation is becoming a source of happiness for the elderly in rural areas. Chung Won-ju, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. A 3-day wake for former Pope Benedict XVI has just come to an end, with a funeral mass set to take place on Thursday morning local time. Tens of thousands of visitors journeyed to Vatican City from around the world to pay their respects, and the wake came to a close on Wednesday evening local time at St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Benedict XVI's body will now be put in a traditional cypress casket and taken into St. Peter's Square 45 minutes before the start of a funeral mass for the recital of the Rosary. Pope Francis will preside over the ceremony taking place on Thursday at 9:30 a.m. local time or 5:30 p.m. Korea time. The event marks the first time in the modern age that a current pope will eulogize a retired one. Pope Benedict, who stepped down in 2013, died in the Vatican monastery last Saturday at the age of 95. His body will be buried according to his wishes in the crypt under St. Peter's Basilica. Turning over to the U.S. now, where the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved the sale of abortion pills at retail pharmacies to customers with a prescription. Previously, only certified healthcare providers were allowed to order, prescribe, and dispense the medication. Pharmacies can now begin applying for certification to sell mifepristone, part of a 2-drug course that induces an abortion. The other drug was already approved for sale at retail pharmacies. Changes also allow patients to receive prescriptions through telehealth services and come just days after the U.S. Justice Department released an opinion that the U.S. Postal Service should be allowed to deliver abortion drugs. This latest move comes as a number of U.S. states look to implement abortion bans, following a Supreme Court ruling that access to abortion is not a constitutional right. Meanwhile, at Twitter, the social media platform has said it will ease its 3-year ban on political advertising. The company tweeted on Tuesday that expansions to the political ads it permits will be made in the coming weeks, whilst cause-based ads will be allowed sooner. Twitter had previously banned political ads in 2019 due to concerns over the spread of misinformation on social media. The latest change, implemented by new owner Elon Musk, is a move to drum up more revenue for the platform, as advertising is its main income source. Since Musk's takeover, a number of large advertisers paused their ad campaigns after the new CEO laid off thousands of employees and reinstated controversial accounts. And finally, the pilot from the first successful crewed space mission in NASA's Apollo program, Walter Cunningham, died on Tuesday local time in Houston at the age of 90. The retired astronaut was the last surviving member of the 3-man Apollo 7 mission. The mission in 1968 lasted 11 days and paved the way for the first man being put on the moon next year. It was also the first spaceflight to broadcast live footage of Americans from space, which saw the astronauts win a special Emmy Award for their daily television reports. Before joining NASA in 1963, Cunningham served as a fighter pilot with the U.S. Marine Corps and flew 54 missions in Korea. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Hello, I'm Lee Ji-hyun with the latest weather updates. Most regions are getting some relief from the winter weather this afternoon, and cold wave alerts have been downgraded or lifted. But along with the rise in temperatures, dust levels also went up with dusty air blowing in from overseas. Ultrafine dust levels in most western regions and Jeju will stay high all day, while the west of Gangwon province will see bad air at night. And here in Seoul is dusty and dry with a dry weather advisory. And of course, East Coast regions are much drier and windier today. Now, top readings are 1 to 2 degrees higher this afternoon under mostly sunny skies, but those in Daegu will notice more clouds moving in as the afternoon goes on today. Afternoon highs will stay above norms through early next week, hovering around 5 degrees Celsius here in the capital, with a mix of rain and snow in the forecast nationwide on Friday into Saturday, and it could come down heavily on central regions. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Those are the headlines at this hour, but do stay with us for our panel session coming up after this break. Thank you for now.